What's poppin', party people? It's your boy Los coming at you live from the year 2024, December 6th, getting close to the home stretch here. Um, so much to talk about. I'm not going to get into all the details, such as the recent election. I'll probably save that for its own video. But I felt compelled to quickly comment on a specific incident that has taken over the imagination and the what's the word, the pop culture zeitgeist or whatever, and that is in regard to the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO. um, as always, the reason I feel compelled to speak my voice or put my voice out there is because I feel like there is a consensus almost that I disagree with, and because I you know I don't like it when I see a bunch of people all agreeing on something and no disagreement existing. Especially when the disagreement has some validity to it. So this is totally off the cuff. I don't have anything pre-prepared here, so it's going to be rambly as always. But let me start by just laying out the different camps of, the different modes of thinking that I've been able to identify and where I kind of stand on this issue. So, a quick recap: the United Healthcare CEO was murdered in broad daylight by an assassin. Assassin might be a stretch of a word. We don't know if it's someone who was paid to do it, a professional, but they definitely had some premeditation. He used the silencer, and there was some. He was like, he knew where the CEO was going to be, so it was, it wasn't completely amateur hour, but it might not necessarily be like a hit job or whatever. In fact, it's likely that it wasn't, based on the evidence as of today. It does seem like the motive, as far as people can ascertain, is that this was somebody who was a customer or client of United Healthcare and had some kind of issue with the company. More than likely, they had either their claims denied, or they were, or they were made medically bankrupt, or somebody in their family died because of a lack of coverage, which is uh, a grotesque and unfortunate reality of life here in the United States. We are the only developed nation to have as far as I know, a system of private health insurance. Every other country handles this in much better ways, which can be empirically demonstrated because the cost of healthcare in those countries is lower. They usually have a form of universal government insurance, meaning kind of like how you pay taxes, you pay into the healthcare system that's funded by the government, and then either there are private hospitals, as in France, or even the hospital system is owned by the government, as is the case of the NHS. I think it's the NHS in the UK. Anyways, so this person is likely to have been a motivated by some kind of corporate malfeasance, negligence, or even, I mean, those might not even be correct terms, because it might have just been them following their own policies and procedures. So just corporate greed. I don't know. I don't know what the right word is, but just like um, and the reason the so that's and the reason I say that is because there's some the bullet casings, the shells, I think they're called. They had some words written on them that were like depose, deny, and defend, or something like that. So it seems very motivated. And another thing to note is that United Healthcare is the worst offender in the United States for denial of coverage for submitted claims. So I believe their percentage is like at about a third, so 33% of all claims submitted are denied, which is higher than the industry average, which I believe hovers around at 16%. Um, and so they are like the worst of the worst in terms of the major health insurance companies on that front. And remember, what that means is that when you have health insurance, you pay every month your premiums, and you have your deductibles and all that stuff. And then let's say you need coverage for something, let's say it's an emergency or you get some disease or something. That means a third of the time that their clients who are paying month to month their premiums, they will deny the specific treatments that are requested, meaning they won't pay for them. And so it's kind of like, what's the purpose of paying into the system that's so expensive if a third of the time you're going to get denied? Now, there's a lot of nuance there as to why and how, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into the specific metrics because, quite honestly, I'm not that well informed on how it works. But either way, it's grotesque. It's an unnecessary system. It is one of the great shames of this nation, in that in the year of 2024, we still have a system of private health insurance instead of, like, the rest of the developed world. So now, what's the conversation? What are people talking about that I feel compelled to comment on? And that is that a lot of people online seem to be either celebrating or, there's a spectrum even with this. So maybe I'll break it up into 4 groups instead of 3. So on the most extreme, and you have people celebrating, right? Some of those people are going as far as saying, more of this should happen. So more CEOs of companies that do awful things should be executed by vigilantes, or, they would call them vigilante justice. Others would call them terrorists. These terms are loaded, but, they're saying this is a good thing and we should see more of it. And they're pointing to the fact that Blue Cross Blue Shield, another major health insurer, was about to deny coverage of anesthesia past a certain limit, a time limit for surgeries. So meaning they would only cover your anesthesia after a certain arbitrary amount of time, after which you would be liable to pay for it yourself, which I imagine is prohibitively expensive for the vast majority of people. So that could mean that if you have a surgery that took, like, I'm making up the numbers here, but it takes 5 hours, and they're like, well, we only cover 4 hours of anesthesia. That means either you would get operated without anesthesia that last hour, or you would have to pay for it, or you just wouldn't get the surgery, which could result in your death. So another terrible, decision by a major healthcare insurance provider. And immediately, this happened in the wake of the assassination, and so some people, when they did that, within a few hours, they immediately retracted it. Notably, a lot of these health insurers have also taken away their board of directors and their C-suite leadership from their websites, so you can no longer see who runs the business anymore. I'm sure as a precautionary measure to prevent copycat incidents, though, given how the internet works, that's not really going to change anything. It's very easy to find that information now. So that taking it off the website probably makes no difference. But yeah, there's a group of people who are celebrating, saying this is great. We're so glad he did it. This guy deserved it. And the reasons that they profess are that through this system of this healthcare insurance scheme, they are directly leading to the deaths of countless people, because a lot of people are not getting the coverage they need because their claims are being denied. And also, they are doing everything in a profit-seeking manner, which unfortunately, in the health insurance industry, one of the best ways to make a profit is by not providing coverage, because if you think about it, every time they have to pay for someone's treatment, it's a huge amount of money that that goes out of their pockets. So if they're able to take your money but then not give you the money when you need it, then they get to pocket that difference in the form of profits. And so it's easier for them, or it's better for them in terms of, maximizing profits, to have an adversarial relationship with their own clients. and what I mean by that is like uh, a oppositional uh, incentive structure, meaning they're incentivized to do things that are bad for their own customers. Um, and that is very true in a lot of in capitalism in general. You see that in the labor force in terms of how work and jobs are defined and created within their current economy. So, um, anyways, the this group of people was very much um, excited about it, and they're like, this is going to have like a chilling effect, meaning that other companies who might want to do similar things or cause further harm to their clients uh, will be more careful now because they know that if they go too far, some vigilante uh, is likely to continue that same practice and murder them. And the again, the crux of it is the system is a word that people might use is systemic violence, which is the idea that there's a difference between individual violence, right, which is if I go to rob a grocery store and I shoot somebody in the process, I'm the one that is responsible for that, directly responsible for that. Whereas systemic violence is like murder via pen, in a sense, which is I might not be the one pulling the trigger, but through these systems that I've created that you are somehow a part of, your death or suffering results from my actions, especially if I'm in a position of power to uphold and maintain that system. And so they're saying, the CEO of United Healthcare, and by extension, maybe the board of directors, you know, other C-suite, other leadership management, the shareholders, potentially, depending on, how they define this. Like, these are all people who are responsible for the deaths of potentially tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the United States, at least over a long enough time span. I don't know if that would be like an annual thing, but a large number of people over a long enough time span who, because they were denied coverage or whatever, because of some flaw of the system, in the way the system works, they did not get the health care they needed at the right time, and either they suffered from it or they outright died. And so they say that those deaths are their responsibility. And I find that to be, I find that to be, there's some merit to that argument. I think using Nazis is always a great example for setting the most extreme, right? Since Nazis are like the worst of the worst in our collective consciousness here in the West, in the United States. So it's like, the concentration camps, right? Like, if you're the person who is organizing the project of the concentration camps, now you're not the one in the gas chambers, pushing the button to kill everyone, or you're not the one pulling the trigger if you're shooting people. You're not the one even necessarily building the building, but you're the one that is the most abstracted, removed, but you're at the top in terms of the power structure, as in your vision and your desires are put into effect by the people below you in that hierarchy. You bear the most responsibility. So it's not the soldier who, drops the gas in the gas chamber, even though that's the most direct action that actually led to the deaths of the people who died in that gas chamber. There is a whole sequence of events that precedes him in which people, arguably with more power and authority than he, uh, made it so that that was the final result. So he's just kind of like the last link in the chain. And now everyone in that chain has theoretical power, agency to disagree, to not go through with it. But in the case of the Nazis, it would result often in their own execution or imprisonment or whatever, if they went too far. So it's not like they had a giant range of options either, that would result in their own death potentially. But the power really stems from the top, and so that's the thinking from this camp of people is, because the top of the pyramid here, at least for this specific company, is the CEO. He's the one that bears the most responsibility, the most blame for as an if out of any of the individuals who run this company for the deaths and the suffering and the financial ruin of all of their all the people who've been mistreated by this company. Um, and I should mention that it's not just death, but it's also the financial ruin. As far as I know, medical bankruptcy is the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States. The idea of medical bankruptcy does not exist in most developed countries, if not all of them. I'm not entirely sure, but I could confidently state that the vast majority of them. It's such a ludicrous concept that they almost are like appalled by the idea. They're like, "What? You can become bankrupt because of you going to the doctor and going to the hospital? Like that's insane." And it is insane, but we live with it, and it's the standard here. So it's the number one cause of bankruptcy. It's a giant number. It's hundreds of thousands of people every year go bankrupt out of an inability to pay for their medical bills. And so it's not just the physical illness and death even, but it's also the financial hardship that is brought onto people. And bankruptcy for the average person is no joke. It's not like when rich people do it. It's very different than when the average person does it. So I was saying, as I was saying, this group of people, they are very vocal about the righteousness of the assassination. They are outright defending the guy, celebrating him, treating him as some kind of hero and potentially martyr, depending on how things shake out. There's variation within that as well, but the general feeling is like, good for him. These guys had it coming. So it was about time something happened, and this. I'm reminded of that famous Dark Knight scene with the Joker and Two-Face in the hospital, where the Joker's explaining his sort of worldview, and he says, like if tomorrow, there's going to be some soldiers that are blown up in Iraq or something, or I don't know, a gangbanger gets shot, something to that effect. It doesn't make the news, right? It's just another day in the world. But if someone who's high up in the hierarchy gets threatened or is killed, then all of a sudden the entire society falls apart, or is up in arms and is very like aware and concerned about that. And so the thinking is, why is this person's life more valuable than the all of the people who have died as a result of his his actions and the actions of others, right? Now, I personally think you can only attribute so much blame to him because he himself is a part of a system that now he has more agency than the vast majority of people within that system, but he still does not have unlimited agency, right? As in the capitalist system, he has a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders to maximize profit. So he can't just say, you know what, I'm going to make a series of decisions that are going to undermine the value of our shares of our company without getting fired by the board of directors or whatever it might be. So yeah, there's a lot of celebration, a lot of uh, you know, wishing for the person to never get caught, to remain anonymous forever, and for this to continue potentially for there to be copycats to do it, because it feels like a sense of justice, vindication, revenge. I mean, these words I think can be used interchangeably in this context, but I think some people would specifically identify with one or the other, depending on where they stand. But either way, people feel morally self-righteous, and they're like, oh yeah, like I don't feel bad about murder or this person's murder because he has led to so much death and suffering and destruction, and um, I'm not going to shed a tear over that. Okay, so that's kind of the one group. Now, there's another group that's more neutral, and so they might take a stance of, well, you know, I don't think people should go and do this, but going to, I don't think this guy should be pursued, or the assassin, I mean, or the I don't necessarily think he did anything wrong. I wouldn't do it myself. I'm not gonna, condone other people to follow through with it. But I'm not gonna, like I was saying, shed a tear. So there, it's more of a stance of like it happened. Um, it probably shouldn't have happened, but I'm okay with the fact that it did happen because of this person doing so much evil. And so these people might not relish in the death of the CEO in the way that the former group does, where they are celebrating and they're making memes and joking about it and talking about how great it is. But this group is very sympathetic, saying, well, this guy kind of had it coming. Uh, I don't think we should continue to do that, but I'm okay that it happened, and it's more of a passive acceptance uh, than a outright condoning of the action. So that's kind of another group, and then the third group um, is people who were against it. People who said, and for a specific reason that I'm going to identify. So a lot of people said this is terrible because this is murder. You are killing someone in broad daylight. Murder is bad. Uh, Most of the time, people have different definitions of when they think killing someone is right or wrong. But for most people in this context, they're saying murder is bad no matter what, and except in certain situations. And so it's terrible that this happened. This guy didn't deserve it. He has a family. He has children, a wife, and friends, community, blah blah blah. He's just doing his job. What's society coming to, where we're celebrating the death of somebody because we disagree with them or don't like the way they run their business, and you know that's kind of the third camp. They're just against it. They're like, this is a bad thing. This should never happen. This guy should be imprisoned and brought to justice, and that's kind of it. Now, in terms of where I stand, so I think that uh, the CEO, and honestly, all the CEOs of a lot of major companies, so I don't mean all CEOs, but I'm saying like a significant number of CEOs of especially of certain industries in the United States, Wall Street, defense, which is just weapons manufacturing and the technology associated with that, um, oil, fossil fuels, um, you know, some like private equity, which I guess falls under the umbrella of Wall Street, pharmaceuticals, health insurance. There is a level of criminality and evil inherent to the system, as well as to the actions of people, individuals who run these businesses, who I think they're criminally liable, and I think they should be brought to justice within a legal framework, within the laws of the United States. And if the right laws don't exist to bring them to justice, then I think laws need to be created, but again, within the legal framework. So, long story short, I'm against vigilante justice. I am against individuals going outside of the legal system to enact their view of right and wrong. And the reason I believe that is because there is a very thin line between doing something out of a perceived sense uh, of justice, right? That you're doing something for a morally righteous reason, and how that can kind of deteriorate. Maybe slippery slope is a better word than a thin line. That can kind of deteriorate into a killing other people for whatever reason I think is justifiable. Now, the reasons I think are justifiable might be few and far between, but who am I as an individual to make that decision, especially if it involves taking the life of another? So fundamentally, I'm against vigilante justice. I'm also a pacifist, by certain definitions. My only argument in favor of violence is an immediate self-defense. So if someone is threatening, someone has a gun, a weapon, or is about to attack someone that I love or myself, or just anybody really that is, innocent and is not themselves, participating in the violence. I think people can and should, defend themselves or others, if using violent means if necessary, up until even killing someone if it's absolutely necessary. So that's kind of where I stand. Other than that, I don't think violence is ever justified. Period. I think it doesn't matter. I think one of the things that I've really realized, and it could be Reddit giving me a misskewed perception of American public opinion, but I even think on this one it's actually probably true, that Americans have a bloodlust. They have a deep desire for vengeance, a desire to uh, reciprocate, uh, kind of in a tit for tat fashion, the harm that has been done to them or others, to the perpetrator. So it's this view of the world that says it's kind of an eye for an eye, and it's especially reserved for the most heinous crimes. So, if someone is a rapist or a pedophile, or at a larger level, like a genocider, whatever. A lot of people believe, or murder, obviously. A lot of people believe that these people should be executed, either through the legal system or even through outright vigilante justice. I wouldn't even use the word justice, but vigilantism, where uh, they're just executed by the earliest opportunity, I guess. And so that is not a definition of justice or morality that I subscribe to. So on the substance of what is being said here, I am not okay with a large percentage of the internet, which again totally curated to my media profile, my ideology, whatever, right? Like these algorithms are serving me a certain slice of the world. But what I'm seeing is a overwhelming support, which most people falling into the camp of outright celebrating, promoting, defending, lionizing the assassin, and or some just kind of neutral thing. It's like, yeah, well, he kind of deserved it. I'm not okay with. I wouldn't do it myself, but I'm okay that it happened, and I'm not gonna boo-hoo for him. And I don't think that's okay. I think this person is a human being who is committing great evil and harm. But I don't think that evil and harm denies him of his own rights and humanity. Now, if he denies other people of their own rights and their humanity, which I think he does through in the company that he works for, I think he should be brought to justice through a legal means, meaning there laws need to be created in which people can then sue or charge this person for criminal acts in the same way we would charge, someone for going to a store and robbing somebody at gunpoint, right? And so I do think that, for example, one of the things that I was reading about was that he was heavily involved in the use of AI to increase the denial of claims or some part of the automation, but basically to make the service even worse for the customers, for the for the clients. And so I think that that is, to me, it is a heinous evil. But I'm also against the death penalty. I'm not. I think it's barbaric. I really think it shows a level of barbarism of the United States that our definitions of justice are so narrow and so skewed that it's like it's okay to kill people as long as they do things that I consider to be bad enough. I think you don't solve. Well, it's not even about solving problems. Just on principle, I don't think humans have the right to take the life of another unless there is no other recourse because your own life or the life of someone very close to you is in immediate danger. I don't believe that it's okay to ever do that. And so whether it's the state, whether it's a person, I think it doesn't matter. It is not okay to kill people. Life is sacred. Life is short. Life is precious. We're the only planet with sentient life as far as we can tell. And human life in particular, I think needs to be held up to the highest standard in terms of its value. And so, and I know that society doesn't do that, but I'm talking about what I think is right, not what I think is how people behave, right? And so I think that the more correct thing would be for, laws, if the laws aren't already in the books, which I'm assuming that they're probably not enough of them at least, for laws to be passed by our government at the various, levels of power, which make the CEOs and the leadership of this, especially the most largest, most powerful companies, criminally liable for the harm that they're causing in society at large. Because right now they're protected by their corporate structure. There's sort of this veil that insulates them from criminal liability, and then we have the whole concept of corporate personhood, which kind of helps them out in that sense. And so, you can only like put the corporation in jail, not the individuals. And I think that's silly. I think that there should be some protection, right? I don't think that every person who works for a company should be also, assuming they're following the law, like also like at risk for facing legal action as individuals. But I think we've taken it to an extent where these people have basically shielded themselves from any kind of accountability. And so I do think it's sad, and I do think it's wrong that this person was assassinated. But at the same time, I think that it's reflective of a society where, because there is no justice, because we have a system of healthcare that has led indirectly, I would even argue in some sense directly, to the deaths and suffering of countless people, that there's just such rage that's out there that this happened, that someone snapped. Who knows what the story is? Maybe we'll find out at some point. Maybe it's this person's spouse or child or parent or whatever died unnecessarily because of a for-profit healthcare system. And so I am not going to celebrate the death of the CEO, nor am I going to say it's okay to take that kind of action. But I am very, I don't think he didn't do anything wrong. So I'm not in the camp of, oh, this is just an innocent person who was killed. No, I think that our system has failed to create the laws that would put someone who is committing those wrongs to justice. And I think someone like him shouldn't be killed, but should be imprisoned. I think that if you are in the business of denying people health care in order to increase your profits, for frivolous reasons, for reasons that could lead to the death and suffering and financial ruin of people who pay you. They're your customers. They literally pay you every month to access your service. I think that is criminal, and I think that's evil. And so it's not like this person is a saint or a good person in my eyes. I think that person is in some ways more evil than the person who assassinated him. The problem is that doesn't make the assassination okay. And so it's this level of nuance that I find lacking so much in the conversations around these issues, because one thing that constantly makes me feel isolated from people who I tend to agree with on a lot of other issues, which tends to be more left-leaning people overall, is that my morals I try to apply them consistently, and so they exist, whatever the context is, it doesn't just dramatically change my morals based on who I think are the good guys or the bad guys. So, I think another example related to my pacifism that's a very famous, very popular example is violently attacking Nazis. I think that's a problem. I don't think you should violently attack Nazis. I think I'm such a firm believer of free speech that I think Nazis should be able to go out in the street and say whatever the fuck they want, assuming they're not like invading people's private property or making threats of violence or anything like that. But if they just want to say like white supremacist shit, or whatever it might be, hateful rhetoric, I think that's their freedom to do so. I think that giving the government the power to suppress that speech is dangerous and leads to, you give the government a tool that then they will use in other ways when it's convenient to them. It's like, I don't know, giving a 5-year-old a gun, hoping that they'll only use it for the right reasons. Like it's not a power that the government should have, because maybe one day it's the Nazis, but the next day it's the socialists or the communists, and they say, you know what, this is a hateful ideology that has led to the deaths of countless people in the world, and therefore if you believe in socialism or in communism, you cannot express your speech and you should be imprisoned, or deprived of your rights, whatever. So it just creates a dangerous subset, and I strongly disagree with those arguments that say, you know, the only way to silence these people, the only thing that they understand is violence. I actually think that, if anything, I think a lot of people who are in those situations were already vulnerable. They were, people who were struggling for different reasons, and they were caught up by a hateful ideology that helped explain their pain and suffering in a way that made sense to them. That's not always the case, but I get the sense that that is the case with a lot of hateful ideologies. And so the point I'm making is, I don't think violence is the answer. I believe in civilization and I believe in society in this specific way, that it is better to strive for and to try to create a world in which we don't just kill people whenever we decide it's okay, but we never do it. We never kill people except in the most extenuating of circumstances where there really was no choice, where it's either me or you. One of us has to die because you have a gun to my head or something like that. That's the society I want to live in, where if someone does something wrong, they're brought to justice through the criminal justice system, and potentially in I would even say in all cases I'd like this, but at least in theory, they're rehabilitated. Where there's a way to repair the harm in the spirit of what's called restorative justice, right? Where through a variety of different means and practices, this person can atone for their wrongs and be re-welcomed into society, even whether they were at the top of the pyramid or the bottom. Again, these are ideals, right? But in order to get to an ideal society, we ourselves have to apply these rules first and foremost to ourselves, where we have the most agency, which is yourself, and then spread these ideas to those around you, right? Like, it's ultimately what we all are willing to settle for and agree to as a society. And I'm just not willing to settle for a society in which people that are causing harm are now, uh, the guillotines are out for them, because I think that it leads to a a sense of mob justice, of mob mentality, which, if you go against the mob, you can potentially be seen as the enemy. Um, it's kind of like all gas, no brakes. Like you open up a door where wherever the mob decides, hey, uh, all of these people, these are the bad guys, and then someone's like, well, what if they're not? And they're like, you're a bad guy too, and so off with his head. And then what does that create? A culture of conformity, a culture of obedience, which leads to its own set of problems that could potentially be far worse. And so, no, I don't think it's okay to murder CEOs in broad daylight. I think it's okay to protest them. I think it's okay to go outside of their homes, and as long as you're in the street and on their property, and protest in front of their houses. I think it's great to bother them and accost them in public. I love seeing Code Pink, Medea Benjamin, is in Congress every day talking about the genocide of the Palestinians to AIPAC recipients, and other supporters of Israel, of the Israeli government, I mean, uh, and their military actions. And that's great. I think she should do that. She's not touching them. She's not blocking their way. She's just saying, hey, she's exercising her free speech for the things that she thinks that matter, and making these people's life, uh, uh, maybe not a living hell, but really, really ruining their day. I mean, I've seen several clips of her pissing off Nancy Pelosi, who is to many of us the devil incarnate. And so that's the version of justice. So yes, let's go protest the investor meeting. He was going to an investor event. There should be a giant protest outside that event. People should boycott companies, and if possible, and switch to alternatives. Companies reward companies that do better practices. And again, most importantly, we should pass laws and regulations that prevent these companies from having the means to do these actions in the first place. That is really my concern, is that we're not using the legal system. And the reason I'm so afraid of not using the legal system is because I really think, because we have been alive at a time of such great peace relative to the course of human history, I don't think people of my generation in the United States are aware of what true chaos, true wild, wild west, violence all around, could actually be like. I think it's a privilege of being born in the modern era where that level of barbarism is not commonplace. It still exists, but it's much more limited to certain parts of this country, where you go back a couple hundred years or all over the world through human history. Like the reason getting to a place where there was a rule of law where people respect the law and believe in some kind of government, was because prior to that it was just ruled by the mighty. It's the same argument that goes to conversations about the United States and its role in the world, where it purports to care about an international rules-based order, where all countries, are at the UN, and they're trying to argue things through legal means and diplomatic means instead of doing what we've done most of human history, which is go to war and kill each other and then let the strongest, country win. Same thing here. I don't want it to be a society in where may the strongest man woman group win through violent means. Is how, because then that's how justice gets defined, that's how righteousness gets defined. It's whatever the strongest people or the strongest group decide is right and wrong, and the way they enforce that is through the use of violence. And so uh, there are parallels to our current society. I'm not saying our society now is uh, you know, free of this. There's definitely a lot of might makes right still happening globally, especially as of late, in terms of nation states, battling each other, and locally, right? But we still live in a world, at least in the United States, in many other European countries, where there are laws and there is some degree of respect for the rule of law. And I do think things would be far worse because I think human beings are products of their environment. And I think people listening to this thinking, well, even if there was no laws, I would never do anything bad or evil. It's like the reason you believe that is because you were born in this society with those values and morals. If you were born in the Wild West, you would just chalk it up to survival. People will justify basically anything, you know, if it means survival, even if it's not actually survival. That's the thing, is that we'll justify things that don't actually connect to the specific outcome that we're purporting to be seeking. So to wrap this up, because it's very long, I'm against violence. I'm against violence that United Healthcare is enacting on their customers, even if it's not they're not the ones pulling the trigger, but they're creating the rules and regulations that are pulling the plug on grandma, or making it so that you can't get your tumors removed because they decided your policy doesn't apply and it leads to your premature death or suffering or financial ruin. That is violence to me. I'm against that violence, but I'm also against the violence that it says that when someone harms us, we have the right to harm them back with equal measure. It is the old saying by Gandhi, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. I totally agree I totally agree to that, and live by that. I don't think that's what justice is, and I don't think is what's right, and I don't think it should be celebrated. We need to focus on changing the system, the government, the policies, using all kinds of action, whether it's again protesting these people, making their lives very uncomfortable, and letting them know that they're not going to be able to just live comfortably among us while they're doing these kinds of heinous evils, and influencing the government, getting the government to pass laws which prevent this. I mean, ultimately, we need is universal health care, right? That's really the main gist. Is we need none of this would have happened if we had Medicare for all. We had some kind of system of universal health care in the United States, and so that's what the fight should be, not some random person, killing a CEO, because at the end of the day, he's a cog in the machine. He's got family, he's got kids, and he's going to be replaced with somebody else who's going to do the same thing. And the only difference is that next time the next guy's going to invest a lot in his own security detail, and now he's going to have armed guards everywhere he goes, but the outcome's not going to be this changed. And I just don't believe in this kind of emotional, sense of justice, which is just like, well, it feels good that he's dead. It's like, no, that's not. It's a short term solution for a long term problem that we need to be serious about. And I am against murder, full stop.